Now, let's move to the obsessive compulsive and related disorder section. This is where we will talk about OCD, obviously, body dysmorphic disorder, hoarding disorder, as well as some causes of OCD. Now, when it comes to OCD, let's define this. It involves thoughts and urges that are intrusive and unwanted. So we have obsessions and or the need to engage in repetitive behaviors or mental acts, compulsions. And so this is how OCD works as like a negative reinforcing property because you have the unpleasant stimulus taking place, the antecedent, which is the obsessions, the thoughts and urges that are intrusive and unwanted. What's the behavior? Well, compulsions, repetitive behaviors, or mental acts. So let's say, for example, somebody has their obsessions involved germs. So they experience the unpleasant experience or urges and thoughts of, I've got germs on me. Behavior is repetitive hand washing for either a specified amount of time or the number of times that a person will wash their hands. So that's the behavior. What is the consequence in this ABC model? The consequence is the removal, at least temporarily, of these thoughts and urges. But again, it's just reinforcing that over time, the obsessions over time through compulsions. Another example of just because something's effective in the short term does not make it productive in the long term and can actually cause further strengthening of the anxiety or the urges or the obsessions. Easier said than done, though. OCD is not as simple as just describing that to an individual. There are a lot of there's a lot of ways in which we can at least treat OCD through psychotherapy or talk therapy, as well as the psychotropic end, where medications are involved in trying to alleviate OCD symptoms. Okay, so moving forward, I've kind of already mentioned an example of OCD and how it will continue to develop, continue to strengthen over time, but you can name just a number of examples. For somebody, they need to lock their door a particular amount of times, or they may need to keep things in a particular order that if they don't do so, it causes significant and unpleasant, um, feelings within them. And so that can only be alleviated by engaging in the compulsion. Okay, now that's kind of glossing over it a little bit, making it a little bit more simplified, but that at least gives you an introduction into maybe further how OCD, in a lot of cases, it's not as simplified as keeping things in order. Obviously, it's more significant than that, and it's more distressing than that, and causing people difficulty in just being able to operate in general. OCD can manifest into some very severe ways, but I'll let you do that research on your own time. But at least that's a way to introduce and make a little bit more sense on the front end, so you can see down the road how it can develop further and be more serious than just the simplified examples that I gave. Okay, next is body dysmorphic disorder. Some individuals have already heard of this before if you're taking this as a class. This is whenever an individual has a preoccupation with a perceived flaw. So they have a specific area of the body that they hyperfocus on and deem as not beautiful or ugly, is what I'm trying to say. They just think that it's a horrendous aspect of their physical appearance. But in all actuality, the perceived flaw is non-existent or barely noticeable to other people. So this will obviously cause people to think that they're unattractive or deformed. It involves usually the skin, face, or hair, but can focus again on any bodily area. And individuals may engage in repetitive and ritualistic behavioral and mental acts, which include constantly looking in the mirror, trying to hide the offending body part, comparison with others, as well as cosmetic surgery. Now, I'm not saying that everybody who gets cosmetic surgery has body dysmorphic disorder, but I would be curious to see the percentage of individuals who do go through with it, if they qualify for body dysmorphic disorder. It affects about 2.4% of adults in the United States, and the rates are slightly higher in women than in men. I almost wonder if it may be due to the unrealistic expectations that society puts on women's looks. Makes you think. Next is hoarding disorder. So hoarding disorder involves great difficulty in discarding possession, regardless of how valueless or useless they actually are. And so this will usually result in an accumulation of items that clutter living or work areas. What this means is individuals keep stuff no matter, and they think that the reason that their rationale behind it is because they think that there's some inherent value to it, or that it may be useful to you down the road. I can assure you those empty McDonald's cups that are accumulating in the corner are not going to be useful to you down the road, but you can't just say it that simply and people just believe it, right? There's a whole distressing mental difficulty that they're experiencing that won't allow them to rationalize it in that way. They still think that it's going to be useful to them later, or that there's some sentimental value to it. All right. We've all seen the show Hoarders probably at least once, and so you see how severe these situations become. I mean, it will literally make one's home totally inhabitable. So, what are some of the causes of OCD? Well, there's neuroscientific perspectives that go into it and describe which areas of the brain may be impacted and why, as an explanation, you experience OCD symptoms. Now, when it comes to the prefrontal cortex, as we've mentioned, prefrontal cortex is kind of like that filtration system where it is involved in decision-making, problem-solving, and judgment, allowing you to be kind of the mature area of the brain, right? But whenever there's an imbalance, or there's a difficulty, I should say, with the prefrontal cortex, this is associated with body dysmorphic disorder, okay? Now, the anterior cingulate cortex, right behind the prefrontal cortex, is associated with hoarding disorder, and the orbitofrontal cortex, kind of like right underneath there where the prefrontal cortex is associated with OCD. So it seems like whenever there's difficulty with those particular areas of the brain, individuals may be at a higher likelihood of developing one of those OCD-related disorders. Next, post-traumatic stress disorder. So let's define PTSD, the risk factors, support for sufferers, and learning and development of PTSD. So the diagnostic criteria for post-traumatic stress disorder includes an individual who was exposed to, witnessed, or experienced the details of a traumatic experience that literally could have caused the actual consequences to their health or well-being. And this can be due to experiencing within one's time in the military, traumatic events that are physical threats to their health or well-being. This can be sexual, violence, things like that, serious injury, severe car accidents. A number of items can qualify for trauma.